Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. This is the latest edition of our 2026 Canine Education Series. Today, we are going to be talking about the FAS scoring system and dog pathways here at Michigan Humane. Thrilled to be joined by my counterpart at our Mackey facility, Allie Bradley, your volunteer coordinator over there in Detroit, as well
Yay!
as Gracie Curtis, our Westland behavior specialist. She is our fearless team leader for behavior here at the Westland shelter. And we're going to take a little bit of a deep dive into just what it is. What do we mean when we use the term FAS? What that tool does for us, as well as how it impacts and informs the pathways that dogs can take with us once they enter our care. So, um, we're going to talk a little bit about what happens prior to intake, before the dogs are even in our care, to follow their pathways. We love to keep dogs and cats, any pet really, like to keep them where they're at if we can, especially if that means keeping a loving family together. We're going to talk about how dogs do move through our system once they are in the care of Michigan Humane. We're going to talk about how we use that FAS scale, the scoring system, for planning a dog's pathway through our system. It can change depending on how we read the dog using that scoring system. Finally, we're going to talk a little bit about what it means for volunteers, how can volunteers help, and then we'll hold some time at the end for questions. We love our statements of intention here in the volunteer team. We like to remind ourselves every time we're coming together to talk about a topic like this that our responsibility is to the animals in our shelter to make their stay as happy and healthy as possible. We're going to talk a little bit about more of the happiness side of things today, the mental health, the behavioral science of it all. But we like to just keep in mind that all of this is for their benefit. We would not use these tools if we did not think we can do right by the animals, do a better job for them by utilizing these tools. So there may be a lot of things that can happen for our dog before they even come here to us, to Michigan Humane, to join us at the shelter or in a foster home of ours. Like I said, our emphasis and really the general push in animal welfare as an entire industry at this point in history is to keep pets where they are. Because what we've learned and what other organizations like us are learning around the country, it is so much easier, so much less stressful, and so much cheaper to keep an animal where they live, to give the support directly to the family that needs it, so that they can just stay in that family rather than to engage with that sort of traditional model of intake, shelter, output, where they are just readopted to a family with more resources or more time or a different housing situation, when maybe there could be some things we do in advance to help them navigate those circumstances. So that's going to look like providing a lot of resources, right? First off, safety net fostering. Maybe someone has a temporary calamity happen in their life. They are not in a position to care for their animals just for the moment. Maybe housing has been destabilized, or we are making a big transition and the animals aren't able to go with us until we've established ourselves into our new location. Whatever the reason is, our safety net program exists so that an animal has a safe place to stay with Michigan Humane, but never actually leaves the ownership of their family. They remain that person's dog, that person's cat. We're just temporarily watching over them until their situation stabilizes again and they're able to take that animal back in and care for them. We serve roughly 40 to 45 of those animals a year, which may not sound like a huge number, but it is a lot on a nationwide scale. We are one of the larger operations offering safety net programs, or at least the temporary fostering that it provides. We, of course, intend to expand that as time goes on. We want to be serving as many of these animals as we can, because those short-term stays do mean that we are still making a difference while using up fewer shelter resources and ultimately achieving the goal of keeping that animal with their loving family. You also may be familiar, some of you, with our One Health program, getting out there to those big vaccination clinic events out in the Detroit area. We have Clark Park coming up very soon in September. We have a new one rolling out eventually with Oakland County. I think that's going to be October. But that's our chance to get out into the community and provide services that are vital for both keeping a pet healthy, but also staying compliant with local laws, specifically with licensing laws that require rabies vaccinations. If we can provide those vaccines in that particular part of their care at a lower price point that is more attainable for the family, that may be the difference maker, right? Um, if it costs you a lot of money to go get a rabies vaccine just so that you can keep your license current and you don't have that money together, it may be difficult to get a hold of that license, and you may face then other legal penalties for the lack of licensure for the animal because it is a requirement in most municipalities here in the state of Michigan. And statewide, of course, we require that animals are vaccinated for rabies because we don't want our animal population harmed by rabies. So offering those vaccines, lower cost, easier, convenient locations where we're meeting folks in their neighborhoods, that's going to help them, again, retain those animals, keep them at home by just getting them the help that they need. Same thing with the pet food pantry. We gave out several million pounds of food last year. Now, it wasn't all of the food that every one of those animals needed for their nutrition. It was a supplement. But again, that is helping us stretch the gap, get across to the next month, the next pay period, the next salary check, whatever the family may be waiting on in order to continue providing care for their animal to get more resources. We can help them get to that point by providing a little bit of a stopgap of getting them a bag of food or a case of canned food, so that they are not forced to consider surrendering their animal for readoption to another home that has more resources for them. And other critically, if you've been to our One Health events or our pet food pantry events, you know that sometimes guests, clients of ours will frequently choose to feed their pets their own food, right? These are folks that's the population we serve, is people that will sooner go hungry themselves than allow their pets to go hungry, which means when we put out that pet food and we get that extra bag of food, that extra case of cans, what we're doing really is we're both helping the animal stay fed, but we are shoring up the health of that human owner. We are making sure that they both have enough to go around so that no one has to choose to make a sacrifice. We've also got community advocate support. Those of you that have worked those pantry events, those One Health events, you may have come across our community advocates working with guests at those events, reaching out to folks to help get them other resources, human service resources, housing resources, transportation, all the things that they may need to continue living their lives normally if some sort of disaster has befallen them, or if they're just on hard times for the moment, getting them the things that they need to both take care of themselves and then by extension provide their continued care to their loving pet. And of course, training service recommendations. We do frequently get, behavioral inquiries, folks that are interested in learning about how we can maybe help them with behavioral support. We're always going to push those folks toward the resources that we co-sign, that we endorse for training, because sometimes the difference between keeping an animal at home and bringing them here to the shelter is maybe just learning a new technique, learning a different way to adjust the home setting for that animal that the owner may not be thinking of or may not have the tools to develop it, but nudging them toward that resource can get them just that little bit more help to make things more manageable at home. Perhaps if they have a dog or a cat who has serious behavioral issues, they certainly don't want to let the animal go just because things are difficult. Again, what you find is that our guests, our clientele, are folks that want to put in the work for their animals. That is ultimately who we're serving, is people that are dedicated to their loved ones. And so we're offering more ways, more opportunities for folks to put in that work to help keep their animal at home. We may refer a surrender inquiry to another rescue operation. A great example is your little collies, blue heelers, Australian cattle dogs, these super, super high drive, high energy animals that are meant to go. They're supposed to be out there running on a 40-acre ranch, rounding up sheep, and maybe they're going a little stir crazy in a little house, in an apartment. It's not a great fit. They need to be surrendered over. Well, are they going to do much better in the kennels here at the shelter? Maybe not necessarily. High drive, high energy dogs like that, they need a lot to do in order to feel comfortable, in order to settle, right? In order to just be tired enough to go to sleep at the end of the day. So we may refer an animal like that to a specialty partner of ours who deals exclusively with those cattle dogs or collies or other just working high energy breeds. Now, of course, owner surrender is still an option. We have our traditional sheltering model of intake, shelter, output. If there really is no other pathway for the animal that allows them to stay in their home, we're going to offer the opportunity for them to come here with potentially some vetting. Our behavior team and our medical team will both consult in special cases if there's something particularly interesting or out of the ordinary going on with the animal. Because ultimately we want to help, but we also want to make the best recommendation possible. And that may include informing an owner who is attempting to surrender an animal that that animal isn't really going to succeed here in the shelter. Or that they may not be an adoption candidate if put all the way through our process based on what we can learn about them. In those cases, again, we may revert back to those alternatives like we were speaking about. But really, the idea is that we want to make sure that any animal we bring into the shelter, we are doing so with the positive outlook that there is a great outcome waiting for them, the hope that we can work with them to get them there, and the expectation that sheltering in the facility here is not going to have so detrimental an effect on them that it makes all of those other outcomes non-viable. Finally, of course, with our stray animals, we do take in plenty of strays at both locations who are just, they're wandering out there, maybe with or without their identification. Frequently, those dogs are returned to their owners. You might hear the term RTO if you're walking around the shelter listening, overhearing the staff talk about a particular dog or cat. That just means they went back home. They went back to where they belong, where they're loved, and we did not have to put that animal through the process and thereby use up a lot of resources that can be better spent on animals that have a longer stay ahead of them with us. Okay. Next up, we're going to talk about intake. So at this point, with the hypothetical dog we're dealing with, we have exhausted those other options. That dog is going to come to Michigan Humane. Either it's a stray or they are surrendered from a home. We have a couple of straightforward steps that we take. First up, which is our intake exam. And Gracie's going to tell us a little bit more about how that process works.
All right. So every animal in the building gets an intake exam. This means that they get pulled out into a room with a trained staff member to spend some time doing this examination. So the first thing we're going to do for every animal is check for identification. So we're going to scan the dog for a microchip. We're going to check for tags. We're going to remove their collars to see if a name or phone number is written on the inside. Going to look for city licenses. And that will dictate what type of hold that animal uh, has throughout its stay. So if we find some level of identification, they have a longer hold where we try to reach out to that owner and hopefully reunite them. If we don't find any owner identification, then that dog is just going to stay here for the standard hold for that city. And then there are other types of holds as well, abandonment holds, bite holds, things like that, that all get fleshed out during the intake process. The other part of the intake exam is every animal gets their basic vaccinations and preventative care. So that's going to include dewormers and monthly flea, tick, and heartworm prevention at the time of intake. It's so important that we get those baseline vaccines and prevention care at the time of intake because they're going to be surrounded by other dogs. We don't know if they've been vaccinated before, and so we just want to keep our entire population healthy. They also get just a very basic physical exam. This is really just to identify any urgent medical concerns. They will get a more thorough physical exam in the future. And then lastly, we give them an FAS score. So this is what we're going to talk about next. One more click, because I noticed that we had a weird transition there. There you go. So FAS scoring was developed by the Fear Free Pet organization. Many of you have probably taken their course and become certified in Fear Free. So this is a scale that Fear Free developed. It stands for fear, anxiety, and stress. And it's basically just a measure of a dog's emotional state at that moment in time. And it's based off of a standardized reading of common body language signs. So it goes from 0 to 5 in 3 categories from green, yellow to red in ascending order of least stressed out, least anxious, least fearful to most. So what this really does is that it helps us first and foremost adjust for the dog's needs in the moment. Whether we're working with a green dog, a yellow dog, or a red dog, we need to adjust our approach, adjust our handling techniques to make that dog feel more comfortable. And then secondly, it really helps us allocate resources to the dogs that need it the most, but we're also going to keep an eye on the dogs that maybe came in at a green and don't need our help just yet. As Kellen said earlier, resources are really what animal welfare is all about. It's about balancing resources and allocating them appropriately. So, starting in April of 2024, we kind of transformed our pathway process, and this was a big part of doing that. So we record an FAS number at the time of intake. It gets recorded during any behavior assessments that that dog gets, any medical assessments that that dog gets. It also gets recorded daily after the ACAs clean the dog adoption floor. They go around and assign an FAS score to each dog. And then while the behavior team is walking around the building every single morning, we're kind of making a mental note of what that dog's FAS score is in the kennel. Based on all of that, I'm just going to throw this out there. Do you think that a dog's FAS score can change day to day, or is it just kind of static as soon as we assign it? That's kind of where that dog is going to be. Feel free to come off of mute or just throw it in the chat.
We have one yes in the chat from Victoria. Thank you, Victoria.
No.
Katie says it changes
Yep.
daily. Yep, Joe said it changes. That is
Yeah,
correct.
so changes daily, changes minute to minute, environment to environment. You could have a dog that's displaying really high FAS in their kennel, a 3, 4, or a 5. You get it out of its kennel and realize, whoa, this dog's really house trained. As soon as it went to the bathroom, everything sort of relaxed. And now we've got a calm, green 0 to 1 dog. So really can change moment to moment, certainly day to day. And that's why we take so many snapshots and try to capture that number as many times as we can. Awesome.
A great example for those of you from our Westland location, if that's your primary volunteer location. A recent resident of ours, the dog Zeus, he didn't really present all that well in his kennel. It was a stressful space for him. We've got him some frequent time out of the kennel to sit behind the adoption desk or sit up with the assistant managers. And wouldn't you know, getting up to that space as opposed to being in his kennel, we saw him relax tremendously. He would spend all afternoon napping, sitting right next to the folks running adoptions, just watching what's going on, no stressful body language observed during those times. He was just having a nice day with his friends at that point at the adoption desk. So it really is dependent on so many things that can change with, without notice at the drop of a hat. It is a snapshot. That is the thing to remember.
Perfect. So then based on their FAS score at the time of intake, in order to not overwhelm one particular department, we decided to basically put a dog on a path based on their FAS score. So if a dog falls in the green category, which is 0 to 1, they're going to bypass behavior and go right to our medical stage, which I'm going to talk about next. If this dog at the time of intake falls into the yellow or red category, so that's going to be between 2 and 5, they're going to make a pit stop first in the behavior department. And that's really just to try and address that dog's needs in the moment as soon as possible. While the dogs that are green are pretty low stress, anxiety, not displaying much fear, behavior really wants to make sure that we are supporting the dogs that need it immediately. So when we're completing a behavior assessment, first and foremost, my main responsibility, my main goal is risk assessment. So anytime I'm thinking about putting a dog into the community or keeping a dog in the shelter for volunteers and staff to interact with, I need to think about the risk potential. So we're really looking for aggression here, human-directed aggression and dog-directed aggression, to kind of understand if this dog is going to be safe to put into the community. Once that's kind of out of the way, because those are really quite few and far between of the dogs that we see, really the behavior assessment is just trying to help us get to know the dog. It's trying to help us identify maybe areas that they're struggling with, maybe areas that need some management by a potential adopter to be successful in a home. We're really trying to just identify things that we need to give an adopter a heads up about to make sure that they feel prepared and that they can help support that dog. So really the things that we're looking at here are the dogs that are easily aroused or don't have a lot of impulse control, the dogs that are fearful of either people or the environment, and reactivity. So dogs that become reactive to things either on leash or once they're behind a barrier. Those are kind of the three main behavioral conditions that we see here in the shelter and that we try to work with. Once we've identified the area that the dog needs help in, we need to develop a treatment plan as soon as possible. Just like a doctor would, we want to try and treat these behaviors. So first and foremost, what we know about shelter behavior assessments is this is such a challenging environment to behaviorally assess an animal. It's a foreign environment. It's really unpredictable, as much as we try to make it routine and structured. And so there can be a lot of stress on board with these dogs. And you see it with the FAS score in particular. And so oftentimes one of the first lines of treatment is using behavior medication. And this really is for the main purpose of decreasing stress most of the time. Sometimes we're trying to address fear, but most of the time, we're just trying to calm the dog down so that we can get them to more of a baseline to really see what's underneath all of that stress. Sometimes a treatment plan just looks like increasing their time out of their kennel and adding more of a robust enrichment plan on top of whatever they're getting every day. And sometimes that looks like doggy play dates. A lot of these dogs are super dog social. And when they can't interact with dogs every single day, they get frustrated, they get depressed. So sometimes a treatment plan really is trying to get them out with other dog friends. Once we've put that treatment plan into place, now we need to look at the rest of this dog's path. Can we maintain and sustain this dog for however long it's going to be here? So what that typically looks like is a behavior recheck. All right, we've put this treatment plan into place. Now in 2 or 3 days, I'm going to pull you back out again. You've got behavior meds on board. We've increased your time out of kennel. We've gotten some doggy play dates in. Is your arousal, the hyper arousal that I was seeing a few days ago, has it come down to a manageable level? If it has, that's fantastic. We can talk about putting you up for adoption or at least sending you through on your path. If we're still seeing concerns, but we want to explore it more, we might reach out to our foster program. We have a small but mighty group of fosters that have been trained to specifically handle some higher level behavior concerns. So we can get a better picture of what this dog is like in a home. Obviously, this dog could go up for adoption. That might be one pathway. That's the end goal here. Sometimes they need to go up for adoption with the caveat that the behavior team needs to talk to the adopter or the behavior team needs to do the meet and greet just to make sure that we are setting that dog up for success, that the adopter knows exactly what they might expect in a home, and so that we can advocate for the dog. As Kellen talked about before, we use rescues a lot. Most of the time, it's really going to be our small breed dogs and potentially purebred dogs. That's just really where most of the rescues are in Michigan. So we might utilize a rescue. They often are foster based, so that's why it's kind of nice that dog can kind of decompress in a foster home before finding an adopter. And then, of course, last but not least, as a last resort, humane euthanasia is an option. If we feel that the dog is dangerous to the people, to the community, to other dogs, if we feel like their quality of life in the shelter is too poor to continue, if they are not responding to treatment. So again, if that arousal, that fear, that reactivity is not coming down to a manageable point where I feel like an adopter could manage those behaviors once they take the dog home, that's potentially when humane euthanasia would be an option. All right.
Thank you, Gracie. Now, tell me if this is correct or incorrect. It sounds like since FAS is such a fluid kind of rating system, can change from moment to moment. How flexible are those treatment plans and pathway plans in response to changes to FAS like that?
Yeah, so really the goal is that, and we see it every day. I could get a dog that comes to my department as an FAS 5, 4, 3, really, really high levels of fear, anxiety, and stress. We get 1 or 2 days of behavior meds on board, 1 or 2 days of increasing that dog's time out of kennel to get a little more exercise, to get their yayas out, as Beth Chamberlain would say. And really, within 2, 3, 4 days, we could pull that dog back out and it's down to a 2-1-0, and really kind of expedites that dog's pathway. As soon as we get that green light of you're manageable, you're less stressed, your FAS has come down, we want to get you to the next stage of your pathway as quickly as possible. As much as I love these dogs, I want them in and out of my department as quickly as possible while also trying to make really well-informed decisions about their stay here. So if that means that a dog has to stay in behavior for a little bit longer so that we can support them, get to know them, I'm happy to do that. But I don't want any dog hanging around that's doing great and can go right on to the next stage for any longer than they need to be.
Now that sounds like quite a balancing act between being expeditious and being thorough, right?
Yes.
So I just want to say that I have a deep appreciation that we have your team here and Laura Donnett's team at the Detroit shelter to do that work, that really, really difficult work, and stay so plugged in with these dogs while making really tough calls about how to address where they're at and what they need.
Thank you.
So, what if they come in and they look super good and that FAS score is really, really low? That must mean something good for those dogs, right?
Yeah, so that means you bypass my department completely. You'll still see my face every day and my team's face every day because we're going to get eyes on you to make sure that you're still feeling good and you don't need our help. But really, you're going to go right to our medical department. So what this does is after intake, this dog is going to get scheduled to get set up for a medical assessment. Just like a behavior assessment, it's more detailed and extensive than an intake exam. So they're going to get a physical exam, but it's much more in depth. They're going to get a full orthopedic exam, full oral exam, eyes, ears, skin, and coat. We're going to check to see if they're spayed or neutered. We are going to put a microchip in them once they're off of their holds and officially a part of legally Michigan Humanes. And then we're going to pull blood to do a heartworm test. If they are heartworm positive, then we'll need to do further diagnostics in the future. If all of that looks relatively normal, they are going to get set up for surgery. So the number one surgery that we do here, and we have a full surgery department for this, is sterilization. So every dog and or every animal leaving Michigan Humane has to be sterilized before it's adopted. On top of sterilization, we have like I said, a full surgery team that is capable of doing basically anything your own vet would do for your dog. So routinely, we're doing mass removals, we're doing full dental procedures, we're doing enucleations, so removing an eye, entropion, which is an eyelid repair, amputations. Really, that's quite routine in the shelter to do. So our medical team and surgery team really are kind of, in some ways, going above and beyond what some clinics in the community could even handle. So we should be really proud of our medical team and surgery team there.
Absolutely. And again, to emphasize the flexibility overall of our processes and our pathways, things like surgery or physical exams for illnesses or injuries, those can of course take priority and be
Yep.
the first thing that gets done if it really needs to be addressed quickly, so that we aren't simply, going, station to station through an assembly line type process and making a potentially ill or injured animal wait for treatment before they can get a different type of assessment done. We're going to, again, meet them where their need is the greatest in the
Yep.
moment. So that might mean that a dog does have a mass removal or an amputation before Grace's team gets time with them, because that was a priority that may have been threatening their health, or may have an impact on our ability to even assess them behaviorally until it's resolved, correct?
Yeah, yeah. I was actually going to say one of the most common things that we see is pain affecting a dog behaviorally. So dogs can't verbally tell us what's going on, but very often, and you'll see it with animals across the spectrum, pain can sometimes come out in aggression or in a dog acting depressed, or behaviorally not right. And so, yeah, I to Kellen's point, whatever that dog needs priority is going to get it. More often than not, especially when we get severely matted dogs, we'll often ask the medical team if they could do a full shave down. Because you can imagine if you can barely kind of move around, how am I going to do a behavior assessment on you? How am I going to get to know you? How are you going to feel comfortable with me touching you? So that's a really common one. And I do also want to point out during the medical assessment, this is another point where FAS score is documented. So if that FAS score is tipping up beyond two, so we're talking about threes, fours, and fives, that's when the behavior department is called in. And maybe we could either assist with the medical assessment or ask them to pause it so that we can take that dog out and treat it. And then vice versa. During a behavior assessment, if we're noticing something medically going on, we're going to pause the behavior assessment, call the medical team in, and say, hey, I feel like something medically is happening with this dog. Can you take a look? So really kind of fluid. Again, yeah, it's the path of least resistance, whatever that dog needs first. Yep.
Absolutely.
All right.
Okay. So,
And then, so again, on the medical pathway, it goes far beyond just a medical exam and surgery. Just like behavior is constantly treating dogs, the medical department is always treating dogs. So whether this is diagnostics, blood work, biopsying a mass, staging heartworm to see how severe the heartworm disease is, to make the best plan of treatment, doing x-rays on dogs, treating heartworm, GI issues, so the dog is vomiting, having diarrhea, or CIRD, which is kennel cough or an upper respiratory infection. So those are really common things that our medical department is treating every day. Once they've gotten the medical picture of a dog and either started treatment or got a treatment plan, now we're going to talk about its pathway going forward. First and foremost, our aim is to get every animal up for adoption. So we're going to try and do that with wavering it, so letting an adopter know this dog has a mass, we did a biopsy, it came back benign, keep an eye on it, and refer to your veterinarian in the future. We might ask the foster department to seek foster for this dog. Let's say it's too emaciated to get surgery quite yet. It needs to put on some weight, or it needs a dental procedure, and we just don't have the capacity right now to do that. So it needs a few weeks in foster while it's waiting that. They also seek rescue for medical concerns. And then the last resort is going to again be humane euthanasia. And these decisions medically are really going to be based on poor quality of life. So that's going to be poor quality of life for the pet, but we also need to consider poor quality of life for the adopter. And we do this both medically and behaviorally. We need to consider that both medical and behavioral challenges can have a significant impact on the pet owner's life, financially, emotionally. And so we really need to consider if that's something that we're willing to ask an adopter to do or can ask an adopter to do. Leptospirosis is something that we're not treating right now. So that animal would be humanely euthanized. That's a zoonotic disease, so it is transmitted from animals to people. We are attempting to treat parvo and panleuk, so we will try to treat them, but if that animal is not responding to treatment or certainly declining, then humane euthanasia may be elected there. And then other unmanageable medical concerns. So these are going to be things that even your home vet would likely be having a euthanasia conversation with you about as the pet owner. So severe heart murmur or severe heart concerns, diabetes, advanced kidney disease, cancer, things of that nature. And then just generally, as with behavior and medical, they often mirror each other. If an animal is not responding to treatment, certainly if that animal is declining medically in care, then we might talk about humane euthanasia there.
great, thank you. And I want to just touch on that again toward the humane euthanasia point. Um, Keep in mind that this is staying in the shelter here is an experience for every animal, typically an undesirable one. They cannot choose to come here. And so we do have to ask ourselves when this becomes the topic of conversation. And this is something I've heard you say before, Gracie, that I really appreciate is how far are we willing to ask that animal to go in their own suffering, right? If there is something that we cannot resolve, we cannot cure them of, that is causing them pain, discomfort, behavioral issues, even an animal that is in pain or an animal that is really struggling behaviorally is not necessarily living a rich internal life in their mind. They're not thriving and simply choosing to, you know, act act in a way that's unmanageable, or they're not choosing not to respond to their treatment. So we have to always talk to ourselves about how far can we ask this animal to go before we are maybe perhaps asking too much and subjecting them to something that it is not humane to continue putting them through, whether that is the complications of advanced kidney disease, or issues that come along with having severe heart murmurs, anything that's really just going to put that extreme restriction on their ability to enjoy life, even with the potential light at the end of the tunnel outcome for the right home with the right resources and the right attitude to come along that may be able to give them 6 quality months, a good year with them before the illness catches up. Are we willing to ask that animal to suffer for an indeterminate amount of time until that perfect unicorn home comes along to manage this disease or their illness, in such a way as to give them more of a gentle off ramp from their life? Okay, so now we're talking. We're in the pathway here. We have an animal who has come through and they have gotten behaviorally assessed. They've been medically assessed. They are ready to go up for adoption because their FAS has been brought down to a manageable or a low level. So what does that look like from there?
Yeah, I think it's really valuable to share with volunteers. I'm so glad we're doing this. All that leads up to adoption, because sometimes I'll get the comment, dogs being walked on the adoption floor. Like you said, this dog had this medical concern or this behavior concern. It looks fantastic. It's doing so great. And that's probably because it went through pretty extensive medical or behavior treatment before it got all spiffied up and put on the adoption floor. So I'm really happy that we're able to share this with you guys so that you could see a little bit of the background there. But yes, so adoption is always the goal here. Once they're up for adoption, they're not quite out of the woods, but they are closer to finding their forever home. First and foremost, there is no space limit or time limit here at Michigan Humane. You will never see us posting anything about kind of, a number of days that that animal has, because that's not how we operate here. So a dog will stay available for adoption so long as it's generally happy and healthy, it's responding to treatment, and it's not declining both medically and behaviorally. Of course, we know that we want the dog to get adopted as quickly as possible. So we don't want you just sitting around for 3 months, 4 months, whatever. So we might call in other departments to help expedite this process. More often than not, we are utilizing our media team because they're fantastic. They will come out on site with their fancy cameras and film a really awesome promo video for that dog. They'll post it on Facebook, TikTok, Instagram. We also, I don't know if people know this, we 2 to 3 times a week go to the news. We go to 3 local news stations. So we're often bringing animals in. Our behavior department has been helping with that. Last week, a dog named Davenport went to the local, I think, Channel 7 news on Friday, and somebody from seeing him was basically breaking down our door on Monday, and he was adopted. So sometimes that happens there. We'll often reach out to our foster department and ask them to post the dog on the foster page. Maybe that dog just needs a little bit of time out of the shelter to kind of relax before it comes back. And then we can also do something called dual status. So again, path of least resistance, trying to open every door and every opportunity to that dog. While it's available for adoption, we might also reach out to local rescues to see if they're interested. All while this is happening, like I said before, FAS is being monitored and documented daily um, during cleaning hours, during the behavior team's walkthrough. And the shelter teams, each department, we will discuss weekly individual dogs just to keep them on our radar, make sure that we're doing everything we can for them, see if there are any other options, any other treatments that we can be doing for them to help them while they're here.
I'll also add to that, we can location swap for some dogs. We have our Detroit shelter. We trade dogs back and forth all the time there. We've also got the Sterling Heights Petco location where we have a dog adoption center. Dogs can be moved from Westland to Sterling Heights or from Sterling Heights back to Detroit or anywhere around there. And sometimes really all it takes is getting different eyes on that animal. Different foot traffic coming through the location might find us the right person. That's even the case sometimes when we have taken in transfers from other organizations. We had dogs
Yep.
come in last year who were from another local rescue that we're partnered with. They had been in their care for around 6 months, available for adoption most of that time. They came here, they were adopted within 2 weeks. And that's just because different eyes were looking at them. The other rescue wasn't doing anything wrong as far as promoting them. They were doing everything they possibly could and doing it well. But different eyes were all it took for folks to just say, oh, yeah, you know what? Found him, got him. Maybe those folks weren't aware that that other rescue existed, or they just happened to miss them on their website, but finding them here got them adopted very quickly. Sometimes just that change of scenery is really all it takes. Okay, so they're adoptable, right? They're up for adoption. No time limit, we said. Well, that might mean that they stay with us for quite some time. And I imagine that's going to have potentially an impact on their overall FAS score trend. Would you say that's true, Gracie?
Yeah, that's unfortunately true. Fear, anxiety, and stress, behavior concerns, medical concerns, unfortunately don't tend to get better with length of stay. We often see them get a little bit worse. So we get eyes on dogs every day. We record those FAS scores every single day so that we can watch for patterns. Typically, when we're starting to see FAS scores creep from green into orange, is when we're going to start thinking that this dog is potentially declining in care. So if a adoption counselor is cleaning that day, they've cleaned everyone, fed everyone, they've been out for potty breaks, and they document a dog's score. I'm going to jump down to the green scores first. As a 0 to 1, we don't need to intervene on that dog with that dog that day. We're just going to continue normal care and enrichment. If that day that adoption counselor gives them a 2 or potentially a 3, there are specific protocols that they need to follow. They need to take that dog for a potty break. They need to find some extra enrichment on top of what's being given every day. And they need to just put in a report to the behavior team. We're not going to make them unavailable for adoption. We just want the behavior team to know. And then certainly if they're walking around that day after cleaning, they see a dog that's displaying a FAS 4 or a 5, that's when the behavior team is going to be notified immediately so that we can address that dog and see what kind of treatment plan we can put into place. It is pretty common, especially to start to see FAS 2s on the adoption floor. That's just kind of when we're starting to creep into just a little bit more stress than a green dog. And so that is a pretty common FAS score that we see here. Um, so just to kind of give you a feel there. Scores are not permanent at all. They change day to day, minute to minute. We don't label dogs. We have plenty of dogs that are on the adoption floor that really, really struggled when they first got here, that were displaying some red, FAS 4 and 5 behaviors. And most of the time, you wouldn't even know it because of the treatment and acclimation that they've had here. So, yeah, a lot of times, even your favorite kind of shelter dog that you're walking really probably could have come from a very, very stressed out state. Yesterday could have had kind of that red moment where they really weren't feeling good. So, certainly not just a stagnant score that we give them. Yep.
I really like what you said there about it really not being a label, right? It is a
Mm.
measurement rather than an identity. There is not a dog who is an FAS 5 and he's an FAS 5 dog. It's going to change from day to day, just like our own moods change as humans, right? We have good days, we have bad days. We have days that start very well, we have days that start very poorly. That's going to be the same for these guys. They got that added layer of, again, no matter how their day starts, it's starting somewhere that they don't choose to be, right? So we're always keeping that in mind. Hence the use of the tool in the first place. So I think this is my turn to talk about some extra opportunities for these guys. We fight kennel decline. We lower FAS scores via many, many methods. We talked about a lot of the ones that happen here in the shelter, but also getaways and sleepovers. These are programs that we are extremely proud of. Since launching the getaway program at the beginning of last year, it has seen tons of engagement at both the Westland and Detroit locations. It has generated boatloads of adoptions, including sometimes from people that didn't even, they weren't the ones that took the dog out for the day. They just met the dog somewhere and said, "Oh my goodness, I think that's my dog." And they sometimes they follow the dog back to the shelter with the person that has them out, and the adoption happens right then and there, and they don't even have to set foot back in their kennel that day. Great point that yes, you can do getaways from the Petco location in Sterling Heights as well. Really, anywhere we have adoptable dogs as an outlet, you can take a dog for a getaway or for a sleepover. Um, so they do get them adopted, and even if they don't, here's the real bonus here is we get great information, right? Imagine you're going into a shelter, you want to take a new animal home, add to your family. What's the most valuable thing to know about them? What are they like in my home? What are they going to do? What can I expect? If someone's already taken them home and done a little bit of that work, they can tell you that. It doesn't even require a whole lengthy foster placement. It can be just a quick overnight. Getaways have to be scheduled at least one day in advance via our website. There's a sign up portal on michiganhumane.org. Sleepovers are available more on a walk in basis. Someone can be here browsing dogs. Someone catches their eye. They hang out with them for a bit. They do the adoption meet and greet, and they say, "You know what? This feels maybe pretty good. I'm maybe a little uncertain. I want to test things out. I want to take it for, take it for a test drive here. Take them home for a day, for 2 days. We'll get them some supplies, make sure they're set up with, expectations, all the things that they're going to need to keep that dog enriched and happy. And then we're going to let them go at it. And we're going to see, hey, does it a fit? Great. Then mission accomplished. The dog has a home. If not, well, what can we learn? Did they sleep really well? Did they ask you to go outside and do their business? Did you lose any shoes or perhaps a table leg from destructive chewing? Were there any other pets around? Did they seem to jibe with those pets all right? Or was it like a disaster and we need to maybe recommend that this dog doesn't go home with cats or rabbits or what have you? Um, that's really, really valuable stuff, right? They are the questions that come up every time we have a meet and greet with a potential adopter. It is the most valuable thing to know. However, the value goes both ways there. You can see here at the bottom, the dog is also getting a break. Again, they don't choose to come into the shelter. I have yet to see a dog walk in through the front door and let us know that they've gotten separated from their family and that they need to start over. Um, they can't ask us for all of this help. So giving them a break from things is huge, absolutely huge. We have data that shows that FAS scores are reduced by getaways and sleepovers. A good night's sleep, like it says, it's a powerful thing for a dog. We get feedback so frequently from folks taking dogs home on sleepovers. They say, well, maybe I didn't actually even learn all that much because he got home, climbed up on my couch, and then he slept for 11 hours. Well, golly, to me, that sounds like a dog who felt safe and comfortable enough to fully let his guard down and relax and just become a part of your couch for the evening. That sounds like a great night to me for that dog. It really does. Gracie, do you have anything to add about the value and the power of our getaways and sleepovers?
I know that because I was an adoption counselor, I worked in shelter med, and now I'm in behavior, but I believe that adoption rates have increased via this program because adopting an animal is a big commitment. And some people really feel like they don't want to adopt something and then return it and have kind of that whole official paperwork, that they've returned an animal. They'd rather foster it and then maybe decide it's not a right fit and just kind of bring it back to the shelter after a nice couple of days out. Or they foster it and go, yeah, this is exactly what I was looking for. I'm going to adopt it. So oftentimes those sleepovers are little test drives, like you said. And I really think that that's helped adoptions because, yeah, people maybe don't want kind of that mark on their record that they returned an animal, which really is no big deal to us. So I think it's been a nice little transitionary like program for that, for sure.
Absolutely. And just in the same way that you mentioned, part of the assessment here in the shelter for a dog is risk, right? We're assessing risk. Well, so are our adopters. So are the folks
Yeah.
that come in to potentially take one of our animals into their family. They are assessing the risk. Am I at risk of having an embarrassing moment if I need to return this dog? Or am I at risk of a safety incident in my home because I have other animals that I need to be concerned for? Or I have little children that I need to make sure this dog is going to, is going to be able to operate and function well around these kids without being, driven into further stress, anxiety by the kid energy. Some dogs just don't do well with little kids. They move fast, they make loud noises, they do things without warning. Not every dog is cool with that, right? So just in the same way that we're trying to figure out what is at risk here in the shelter, for the adopter, for the shelter. Everyone that takes a dog home from us, whether they're adopting them or just taking them for the getaway or sleepover, they're also assessing that risk. What am I putting on the line to bring this animal into my home, into my family? And the more we can take that barrier down, the less that they are putting at risk to interact, to commit with one of our animals, the more likely we are to make a high quality adoption match and a lasting one at that. Okay, so we've kind of followed the pathway all the way through. We know what can happen for a dog in Michigan Humane's care. We know what awaits them. We know how we are measuring that stress that they're experiencing. We're measuring the effect of this whole experience on that dog. How can volunteers plug into all this and help? And really, the answer is to be advocates in the way that it's an answer to so many other things in animal welfare. But that means a few things for us. In the shelter, if you are someone that works a dog positive start role, you are working with the dogs regularly, and you have feedback to share about that dog, share it early, share it immediately. If you notice that something is different with your favorite dog, if you notice that a new dog is very difficult to manage because of some specific behaviors, share that feedback. Let us know, me or Allie, your coordinators, Gracie's team, Laura's team at Detroit. We want to know what it is like for you, the volunteer, to work with the dogs so that we can draw what information we can from your experience and synthesize that into further action in their treatment plan or in their adoption plan. We also, again, talking about risk, we want to avoid risks and assumptions. If you are not certain that you understand how a dog might behave given what you read from them body language wise, it's always a good idea to go get help. Grab an extra set of eyes to take a quick read of that dog. If you've already got the dog out and you need to return them to the kennel because the behavior is unmanageable, go ahead and put them back. Trust in a fellow volunteer or a staff member to get that dog out later on when maybe you feel like it wasn't the safest thing for you to continue working with that dog. That can happen when you're halfway around the building and you're nearly finished with the walk. It could happen when you're 3 feet away from the door of their kennel and you only just got them out. If you feel like handling a dog or dealing with a particular behavior is putting your safety at risk, we need to do something different. We need to make a change. Because again, that is not something that we are ever going to ask you to do, is lay your own safety on the line, put yourself at risk for the sake of one of the animals in the shelter. The other thing, again, going back to the fact that FAS scores can change from moment to moment, you want to avoid assumptions. Do not assume that a dog you've worked with before is going to be precisely exactly the same the next time you work with them. It won't necessarily mean that that dog is now suddenly deep into kennel decline or they are failing to thrive. It might just mean that they're having a slightly more difficult day than they did last time you saw them, than yesterday or the day before. And that you just need to do something different with that dog rather than what you were planning to do or what you did last time, potentially. Um, Freedom of choice, respect for the dogs, those go hand in hand, right? If you see body language or action that tells you, I don't want to leave the kennel, the door opens and they go straight to the back of it. Well, I'm not really going to try to convince that dog to come out with me. I'm not going to try to sell him on the idea that I'm going to provide a great experience. I'm going to empower him to make that choice and say, you got it, pal. I'm going to move on to your neighbor because you're showing me that you don't want to go. We want to stay keyed in on their body language as well throughout an interaction. You always read them when you're going to get them out of the kennel, but stay clued in. Are we halfway around the building? What's different in the new area where we're in compared to where I got them out? Maybe all of their neighbors were barking at them and they were fine because they're really not all that dog reactive, but now I got outside and a garbage truck went by. And that this dog really doesn't like garbage trucks, or the stimulus is just setting him off. something has changed. I need to be paying attention so that I can respond to those changes and manage my dog's behavior, manage myself as well for my own safety. We also want to hold ourselves accountable, right? When we make our decisions, we want to commit to the action that we're taking. We want to make sure that we stand by what we do with the dogs. If you feel like you're about to do or you want to do something with a dog that you couldn't necessarily justify or defend after the fact, maybe reconsider that action, right? It is really important that we make sure that we hold ourselves to the same standard of offering interactions to these dogs that are as stress-free, as safe, and as healthy as possible. And we never ever want to, get too relaxed or inattentive, that falls away from our top priority, because then we are not in a safe position with that dog any longer. If we do not understand their behavior, if we do not understand what body language we are seeing, then we're no longer safe to be handling that dog. And finally, of course, ask questions. Every staff member, every other volunteer is a potential resource for you. If you need help from someone, even if it's just, hey, can you take a hold of this leash to get this dog the rest of the way in the kennel because he's really pulling hard in the other direction. I need to do something different, or I'm a little overwhelmed and I need to let someone else take over. Maybe I just need an extra set of eyes on a dog to tell me that my planned course of action is the right one, or maybe you've got a different recommendation, right? Where we are the most vulnerable is where we have the least information. The more we know about a dog, the more we know about other volunteer and staff experiences with a dog, the safer we can be with that dog. Now, as it comes to stuff outside of the shelter in our communities, all of the regular stuff applies. Fostering them. If you have room in your home for a dog, and maybe you're interested now after hearing us talk about FAS and pathways, maybe you're interested in learning about what it takes to be a behavior dog foster. You really want to help those tough cases. You can reach out to me or Allie for more information about how to get connected to that program. There are specific trainings and some onboarding steps that you go through with the foster team, but they would really love to hear about your interest and your enthusiasm, because the more of these foster homes we can offer to our dogs who are struggling behaviorally, the lower our overall average FAS scores are going to be in the facilities themselves, and thereby we're going to be able to offer these dogs a longer pathway where we have more time to give them to find that right home for adoption, especially if it is going to take them a little while longer because of a chronic illness or an old injury or something that maybe makes them slightly less appealing than your bog standard 2-year-old ultra healthy pitty that is just ready to go. Getaways and sleepovers. Even if you're already an internal volunteer, these are mainly public geared programs. Everyone can participate in them. You don't have to just be Johnny off the street in order to do a sleepover. You can talk to me or Allie. You can talk to the staff at the adoption centers about taking someone home for a sleepover and giving them a break from the shelter here. Participate at our events, like we were talking about with the pantry, with One Health. Those are our opportunities to get out there in the community and to help people with dogs who need our help, keep them at home rather than bringing them in here where they've got, as you've seen today, they've got a much longer road ahead of them than just bring them in, adopt them back out. If we can keep them where they live by providing food, by providing vaccines, by providing a great experience for being connected with Michigan Humane, that's going to go miles and miles, as far as keeping them out, keeping our resources allocated to the most effective areas, while also avoiding the heartbreak for a family of having to make such a difficult decision, as to give up the loving pet that they committed to. And, typically most folks intend for that to be a lifetime commitment. It's absolutely heartbreaking, for some folks to have to consider turning over an animal, to us. So we'd rather keep them there. A little fun fact for everybody, we see roughly a 4 times savings of resources, for putting them out into the community versus here in the shelter. It is much more costly to shelter an animal, here at the facility than it is to give them a free bag of food and a super cheap rabies vaccine and have DACC at the event there with us doing their license right along with that. That's a one-stop shop for them. They're taken care of. Their pet's good for the year. They've got some extra food. We're going to see them next month at the next distribution event. But by doing so, that pet's going to stay there and we never have to get to know him. The people that know him and love him best can stay his main people, right? In general, just spread word of mouth, let folks know about the kind of work that we are doing here at Michigan Humane. Um, a lot of our communication, a lot of animal welfare communication in general at this point in history is really undoing a lot of myths that were created in the 20th century when animal welfare in the US was still much in a very much nascent state of being. And we were really finding our identity as advocates, as caretakers for these guys. And so that means that a lot of outdated perspectives exist out there in the community about how little a chance a dog might get here, how difficult it is for any dog to get adopted from an organization like ours, when for all of the reasons we've talked about today, that is simply not true in the way that it was 40 years ago, 50 years ago, 60 years ago. Of course, the Fear Free Shelters course, anyone who is joining us live, you can scroll back up in the chat, and Ashley Ray shared the link to the Fear Free Shelters program. It is a fantastic course that teaches you all of the ways that we are constructing the space here, the way that we approach the animals, the way that we handle them in such a way as to eliminate as much fear from their experience as possible. It's the first letter of FAS, right? So it's a pretty big deal for us to take that fear-free approach. We educate other volunteers and staff on that approach. If you've taken a training with me or with Allie, you are being advised on how to use a fear-free approach with the shelter dogs. That is the approach we want everybody taking. We don't subscribe to things like dominance training or aversion training, anything like that. It's all got to be positive reinforcement, fear-free practices, which means giving them that empowerment and avoiding choices that are going to add stress rather than subtract it. And then finally, of course, donate. There is always a need for resources in animal welfare. We've talked a lot today about how resource allocation is the big balancing act for an organization like ours. Giving things like long-lasting chews, hard treats, peanut butter, things that we use to enrich the dog's stay with us are extremely helpful because it allows us to produce more of those items you've seen in the shelters, the foraging bags, the foraging tubes, frozen Kongs, frisbees that we smear with peanut butter and stick to the back of the kennel for the dog to get at. All of those things are tremendous assets for us to help manage FAS scores in the shelter and keep stress overall down as much as we possibly can. So now that we have spoken at length about all of these programs, I want to remind everybody it takes all of us to do this work. Remember that Michigan Humane has roughly 250 paid staff. Of you, the volunteers in the active category, there are more than 1,000 of you participating with us on a regular basis. Roughly 5,000 people receive the newsletter, and it takes every one of us working together to accomplish our mission and to keep these animals as happy and healthy in the shelter as we can. So with that, it is time for questions, and I'd like to turn things over to our moderator for questions, Allie Bradley. I can see you've already shared the Amazon wish list for Sam requested that information. But now for anybody, if you have a question or anything, please feel free to come off mute and let us know, or use the raise your hand function, type the question into the chat. And I am going to take a beat and drink some water to give you all time to do that.
It doesn't look like any questions are in the chat, so please feel free to come off mute and say what you need to say or ask what you need to ask. Don't be shy. We don't bite, I promise.
Hi, this is Joe. I've got a question for the team. Uh, and it's kind of like a pre-intake question. I've had a couple of experiences with friends and family where they've had a dog, and then their children have had a child, and then the dog gets aggressive with the child, and the first thing that the vet recommends is euthanizing the dog. So I was wondering if surrendering at the Humane Society is an alternative that can be considered.
I can jump in because I get this once a week. So the thing about dogs not getting along with children is it needs to be manageable. Just because I tell a future adopter that this dog is uncomfortable around kids, I cannot ever remove all of the children in the world. I can't expect a dog to never encounter a child or to never encounter a dog just because I say that they're not really comfortable around dogs or cats or whatever. So we do get that a lot. It has to be manageable. There are certain lower level cases where maybe the dog has potentially pain. It's a senior arthritic dog, and anytime the child comes around, the child's pressing on the hips. Or it's got an ear infection, and every time the child comes around, it's grabbing the ear, and that's where you're seeing the aggression come from, that we've been able to take dogs in. If truly the dog cannot be safe around children, we probably won't be able to take that dog into the shelter. Just because, again, I can't take all the kids out of the world. And even if that dog goes to a home without kids, I have to consider that kids exist in the world with us, on walks, at the pet store, at the vet clinic. So those are the considerations that I have to keep in mind for those situations.
Great. Thank you. Yeah, it's a kind of a nuanced situation, so I appreciate your
Yep.
insights.
Yep.
Anybody else? Questions about the pathway, the FAS scoring, any of those?
I do want to say cat pathways take a very, very similar course. We just don't document FAS scores. They do make FAS scores for cats. They make them for horses too. It's kind of an interesting read. But we just don't utilize them in the shelter. But cat pathways otherwise are very, very similar. If they need behavior support, if they need medical support, sterilization, and then up for adoption. So I know we just hit on dogs today.
That is a great opportunity, though. Thank you, Gracie, for the chance to plug that we just did a feline education session. I think it was last month
Yep. And
about
we have one
cat
coming up in a
pathways.
couple of weeks too. Yep.
Yes, so we're doing a lot more feline ed stuff as well. We just did, it's on our YouTube channel. There is a feline education session about specifically cat programs and pathways involving things like TNR, SNR, working whiskers, regular adoption, um, all of that stuff. So you can find that on our channel. If you just find us on YouTube, you'll get a link in our follow-up email from today that has the link to the YouTube recording of today's session. That's also going to put you on our YouTube page so that you can see all of the other educational sessions we've offered, including that Cat Pathways one. Any other questions at the moment from anybody? These are all, they're great so far. I'm loving the conversation.
I have a question, Gracie. So you did say about the kid thing about you can't remove the kids from the world. I just want to provide some clarification for volunteers if they ever so happen to see the recommendations on the front of their adoption paper. What does that exactly mean, and why do we put that there? Because I didn't want anybody to get confused about that.
Mhm. Yeah, so specifically when we're talking about aggression, we have to be really clear what we're putting up for adoption. So we are not putting human directed aggression or dog directed aggression up for adoption ever. That's not really a conversation, that I hear being had by any powers that be. We're very comfortable and proud of where we're at behaviorally with what we're putting up. So when the question was asked about the dog is being aggressive to children, that's kind of where it's like it's a little bit more black and white. We just really can't put that up for adoption. If we see that a dog would be most successful in a home without little kids, typically it's going to be either a dog that is struggling with arousal. So maybe once they get excited, they have a hard time settling down. They might be young and really don't have a ton of impulse control, kind of like a little kid. Those dogs sometimes don't mix well with little kids. There's not aggressive intent, and we're also not putting them up for adoption if their arousal is so out of control that it's unmanageable. They're mouthing you and breaking skin, even though it's not aggression. We're probably not putting that up for adoption, even with the caveat of no young kids. When you are seeing those restrictions, it's either, yeah, those easily excitable dogs that really I think children could potentially get knocked over, get mouthed on, something like that, or a fearful dog that is making every effort to say, no, thank you, I'm moving away, my body language is very clear, as opposed to a child walks by and instead of running away and saying, no, thank you, no, thank you, they're feeling so threatened that they are lunging and trying to bite the child. Those are two different, very different levels of manageability. I
Mm.
can tell an adopter, this dog is fearful. When you see his tail tuck, when you see him turn his head away, when you see him move away, those are all signs that I'm fearful. It doesn't really go over so well if I tell an adopter, I think this dog is going to lunge and bite your kid if it sees it. Like those, just the manageability of those two extremes is what we're really considering when we put a dog up. So you might see some
Mm.
kid restrictions, and it's really to try and kind of put that dog into a home where it's going to be most successful, as opposed to avoiding risk because we think the dog is aggressive or something like that. Does that make sense?
I think that clarified it definitely. It's just it might trigger the dog in some type of way, or or potential have injury, like you said. If the dog has a little bit more arousal, you don't want a little kid getting knocked over, running down the hallway or something like that. And that's very similar as well to us placing like only dog on their paperwork as well, correct?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
they qualify for only dog. Again, it's not because they're necessarily dog aggressive, so you cannot be straining towards dogs on a street, pulling your owner across the street to go and be mean to a dog. That's not something that we're putting up for adoption. Most of the time, our only dog candidates are dogs that mind their own business. Right?
Yeah.
You stay on your side of the street, I stay on my side of the street. Very manageable. Not barking, lunging, straining towards dogs, but they're like, I'm gonna pretend that you don't exist. You stay over there, I stay over here. And they really look quite uncomfortable with dogs, but are giving us really big cues that they're uncomfortable. And an adopter can easily read those cues and just walk them away from the other dog.
All
Yep.
right. Well, thank you for clarifying.
Yep.
Okay, I don't have anything in the chat, so I think it's good to go to wrap things up, Kellen and
All
Gracie.
right. Yes, we will take the lack of further questions to mean that everyone is now an expert on the FAS scoring system and how dogs move through the shelters at Michigan Humane. But like I said, if you need a refresher, we will publish a recording of today's session. Also for anyone who registered but was unable to join us live today. Once again, I want to thank everyone for being here to listen in live. Appreciate the questions and the conversation. Please feel free to contact either me or Allie, your coordinator at your home site. If you have any further questions about today, or if you're interested in any other resources about dog behavioral science, FAS scoring specifically, things like the ladder of aggression, body language reading materials, we're happy to provide more educational stuff to you. But I will say in just final wrap up, again, thank you all for your time and effort, both advocating and caring for the animals in our shelters and in our community. We will allow you now to head off and enjoy the rest of your Wednesday. Thank you so much for joining us, and goodbye.
Hi, everyone.